Hey everybody, it's Beej with Lambda School. We're going to be talking in this video about Django migrations, an important concept in Django. The objective is to be able to describe and use the migration system. We're going to learn what migrations are. We're going to learn how to look at the SQL statements that are behind migrations. Don't worry if you don't know SQL. It's okay, we'll learn more about that later. And we're going to learn how to apply migrations. So what you may have noticed before when you ran the server, you got a warning that says you have 15 unapplied migrations. Your project may not work properly until you apply the migrations. What does this mean? What is a migration? Well, it's a little bit difficult to talk about out of context, but take this information in now, and later on when we add information as a model, we will see how this comes into play a little bit better. But the idea is that we have some Python code that describes some data in classes, and we need that data to actually be represented somehow in a SQL database. So there's a mapping between the class that exists and the SQL that populates the database. Django specializes in this mapping. So the mapping that actually creates the database tables that match up with our Python class models is called a migration. So the migrate code will take one of our models, turn it into SQL, and create a table out of it. And what this is saying right here is that we have 15 unapplied migrations. That is, we have some code written somewhere for which the SQL has not yet been executed to generate the database. Now that's a little bit weird because we haven't actually written any code yet. So what is this stuff, these migrations that need to run in order to populate our database correctly? Well, it turns out it was stuff that was made when we first initialized our app. So when we initialize the app, it makes some migrations for us to start. And we can actually look at those migrations with the show migrations command, run from manage.py. If we do this, it'll say which migrations are unapplied. And there are 13 or 15 of them rather, just like it says up here, right here. So these are the migration names. And this little empty checkbox next to it means the migration has not yet been applied. So what these represent is some class that is used somehow within Django. And these categories we see, admin and auth and content types and sessions, these are built-in boilerplate categories that you get automatically when you create your Django project. But we can look and we can actually see what the SQL for this is if we're curious. Now, in the normal course of affairs, you don't usually have to look at the SQL for this. But we can look specifically and say, hey, what is the SQL associated with, say, this migration right here? And the command to see that SQL, and again, it's okay if you don't know SQL, you can make sense of this later. You use the SQL migrate command. You give it a package name such as auth, which I'm getting from right here, and then you have to give it the migration ID, such as 0001 initial. And then if we run this, it'll tell us what SQL is being executed in order to perform this migration. This is kind of a bit of a look under the hood. Again, in the normal course of affairs, you don't really need to know what SQL is there, but if you want to see it, here it is. We begin a transaction. It's creating a table called the auth permission, auth group. It's creating a table, auth group permissions. It's creating something about users, user models, indexes. So this is all the stuff that it's doing for us in this particular migration. This migration hasn't been applied yet, but we can do it. We can apply migrations. Again, we can show migrations with the show migrations command. And if we want to apply them all, we say manage.apply migrate. And this will apply all those migrations. It says they've all been applied, okay. Now if we show migrations again, we see that there is an X next to all of them, saying that these have all been applied. And sure enough, if I say migrate again, it says, hey, I got no more migrations. We've already done it. But here's the catch. Now, I shouldn't say catch, but here's the result. When we run the server again, now that error message, the warning about the 15 unapplied migrations is gone because they have been applied. And of course, we can go check our server and see that it is running successfully. So this has been sort of a sneak preview of migrations because we didn't actually make any of our own migrations. Later on, when we create a model to model our own data, that model will not yet have anything in the database in which to store that model's data. A migration needs to be created in order to go from our model into SQL into the database. And fortunately, we'll learn in a future video that Django makes this process also fairly painless to create the new migration and then to apply it. One more thing to note is that after the first time you migrate, you will notice that there is a db.sqlite3 file existing now that perhaps wasn't there before. This file is the SQLite database that was just created to hold all this information that we saw with show migrations. So that SQLite database now has tables for all this information and can be used normally. Again, in future videos, we'll learn how to make our own migrations when we do our own data models. But in the meantime, a challenge for you is to set up another basic installation, give it a run without first running the migrations, then go examine the migrations that need to be applied, apply them, and run the server again to make sure that those migrations have gone away. And as always, thanks for watching this video.